It's 11 p.m. and you're buried in a tutorial that has zero connection to your actual job. Last month, it was photography. Before that, coding. Before that, psychology, music theory, a language you might never speak. You have 5 half-finished projects, a browser packed with tabs from completely different worlds, and one question that keeps looping. Why can't I just stick to one thing? Everyone around you seems to have a clear lane. They introduce themselves with a single word: designer, accountant, lawyer. When someone asks what you do, you hesitate because the real answer is a list. Most people look at you and see someone unfocused, a jack of all trades who masters none. They tell you to specialize, stop starting new things, finally commit. But the truth is the opposite. That restless curiosity you keep apologizing for isn't a lack of discipline. According to the psychology of polymaths, it's one of the most consistent patterns found in people who reach the highest levels of their fields. Your multiple interests aren't what's holding you back. Used the right way, they become an unfair advantage almost no one teaches you how to leverage. Welcome back to Mindenix. Today we're breaking down the psychology of the polymath, the person with many serious interests, sometimes called a multipotentialite. We'll look at what the research actually shows about minds like yours, the 3 unfair advantages you're already carrying, and how to stop scattering that gift and start compounding it. Let's begin. First, let's give this pattern its proper name. It isn't a flaw with a cute nickname. It's a documented profile. Psychology calls it polymathy, the serious pursuit of multiple fields across a lifetime. The strongest evidence for its power comes from an unexpected place: the biographies of Nobel Prize winners. Researchers Robert and Michele Root-Bernstein spent years studying the lives of laureates in science, literature, economics, and peace. They compared them to ordinary professionals in the same fields and found something striking. Nobel laureates were far more likely than their less famous colleagues to maintain serious interests outside their main domain. They painted, played instruments, wrote poetry, built things, studied subjects that had nothing to do with their prize-winning work. The average laureate kept real engagement in more than 2 separate areas of knowledge and practice. Many of them said this wasn't accidental. They treated their side interests as deliberate fuel for their best ideas. The people at the absolute peak of human achievement weren't the narrowest. They were the broadest. So how does this actually work inside the mind? Why would learning photography make someone better at business, or studying music make a chemist stronger? The mechanism has a name: transfer. Your brain doesn't store what you learn in sealed boxes. Every field you enter teaches more than facts. It teaches patterns, structures, ways of shaping a problem. When you carry a pattern from one world into another, you suddenly see solutions that people trapped inside that world can't see. To them, it looks brand new. To you, it looks familiar. Meanwhile, something very different happens in the mind of the pure specialist. Researcher Erik Dane described it in the Academy of Management Review with a useful term: cognitive entrenchment. The deeper someone goes into a single domain, the more fixed their mental map becomes. That stability makes them fast, but it also makes them rigid. They stop questioning the map. They start rejecting anything that doesn't fit. Their expertise slowly hardens into a cage. Think of it like farming. A field planted with one crop is efficient, until a disease arrives that the crop can't resist, and the whole field dies in a season. A forest is messier, slower, harder to explain. But a forest survives almost everything because nothing can wipe out that much variety at once. The specialist is the single crop. You are the forest. Maybe you're thinking, if breadth is so powerful, why does my path feel so slow? Why do I feel behind everyone who picked a lane at 22? Here the research has something almost comforting. In 2022, scientists Arne Güllich, Brooke Macnamara, and David Hambrick published a large analysis of more than 6,000 athletes, including hundreds of the best performers on the planet. The finding flipped decades of advice. World-class athletes usually weren't the kids who specialized early. They were the ones who sampled widely, started their main sport later, and, importantly, progressed more slowly at the beginning than the athletes who peaked at the national level and stopped there. The same researchers pointed to an identical pattern in science. Nobel laureates had broader training and slower early progress than colleagues who won smaller awards. Slow early progress wasn't the mark of the losers. It was the signature of people playing the longest game. So if your 20s or 30s feel like a mess of exploring, restarting, and switching, You may not be falling behind at all. You may simply be in your sampling period, the exact phase the greatest performers went through before anyone knew their names. You're not late. You're loading. Now let's get specific. Here are the 3 unfair advantages you're carrying right now. Advantage 1. You can import ideas. Picture a meeting where a team has been stuck on the same problem for weeks. Everyone in the room has the same degree, the same training, the same mental map, which means they're all searching the same small territory. Then someone connects the problem to something from a completely different world, a principle from biology, a trick from game design, a structure from storytelling. The room goes quiet because it works. That move has a name in psychology: far transfer, carrying a solution across the border between 2 unrelated fields. Specialists can't make that move easily, not because they aren't smart, but because you can't import from a country you've never visited. Every interest you've ever pursued is a border you've crossed. Your so-called scattered past is actually a network of trade routes, and ideas are the cargo. Advantage 2. You are more resistant to the expert's disease. Remember cognitive entrenchment, the way deep expertise hardens into rigidity? Now think about what happens when a field changes, and every field eventually does. New technology arrives, the rules shift. The map that took the specialist 20 years to build becomes wrong in 20 months. For them, this isn't just an inconvenience. It's often an identity crisis, because their entire sense of self was planted in that one crop. But you've lived through this shift many times on a smaller scale. Every time you entered a new field as a beginner, you know how to not know. You know the discomfort of the first clumsy weeks, and you know it passes. Dane's research pointed to exactly this. Exposure to tasks outside your main domain is one of the ways entrenchment gets broken. What feels like restlessness is actually a workout, and the muscle it builds is adaptability, the single most valuable trait in a world that refuses to stay still. Advantage 3. You can own an intersection. Here's the math almost no one explains. Becoming the best in the world at one thing is nearly impossible. Millions of people are competing for that single spot, and most of them started earlier than you. But becoming genuinely good at 2 or 3 things, and then combining them puts you in a category with almost no competition, because almost no one has your exact combination. A solid writer who understands psychology and knows how video works can build something a world-class writer with no other skills cannot. A capable programmer who also understands design and can speak to a room becomes more valuable than a brilliant programmer who can do neither. You don't have to win the crowded race. You can walk over to a race with one entrant, you, and collect the prize. Specialists compete on depth where the line is endless. You compete on combination where you might be the only one standing. But every advantage has a cost, and it's time to be honest about yours. The price of breadth is that the world can't easily read you. Society runs on labels, and you don't fit on a badge. At dinners, in interviews, on forums, you watch people's faces flicker with confusion when your answer to "what do you do?" takes more than one sentence. The deeper cut is internal. Because you can measure yourself against a specialist in every one of your fields, you always have someone to lose to. The full-time photographer shoots better than you. The full-time coder ships faster than you. So you privately conclude that you're mediocre at everything while completely missing the one scoreboard where you win, the combination. No one built a scoreboard for it. That is the paradox. The very breadth that makes you rare is what makes you invisible. You spent years building an advantage and then let people who don't have it convince you it's a weakness. So what's the way out? How do you turn scattered interests into an actual edge? Let's be clear about what the answer is not. The answer is not to amputate your curiosity. Pick one lane and force yourself to stay in it. That advice fails for you the way a cage fails a bird built to migrate. You cannot willpower yourself into being narrow, and the research suggests you shouldn't want to. But breadth alone is not the advantage. Breadth plus 3 principles is. Principle 1, finish things. This is where we need a hard conversation, because there is a counterfeit version of the polymath, and you need to know which one you are. The counterfeit is the collector. The collector starts everything and completes nothing, watches the tutorials, buys the equipment, reads the first 3 chapters, then quietly leaves when the beginner's excitement wears off and the real work begins. If that's the whole pattern, let's not decorate it. That is not polymathy. That is consumption wearing a costume, and no amount of new interests will fix the fact that none of them are ever carried to the point of producing anything. The Nobel laureates were not tourists in their side fields. They were serious amateurs who performed, exhibited, published, built. So here is the dividing line. In each field you enter, stay until you've made something real, a finished project, a performance, a thing that exists outside your head. You don't need mastery in everything. You need proof in everything. Principle 2. Build the bridges on purpose. Your edge is not the interests themselves, it's the connections between them. But those connections don't always form on their own, because your mind, like everyone's, tends to keep contexts separate. So force the intersection. When you learn something in one field, ask one deliberate question: where else does this apply? Take the pattern from your sport into your business. Take the structure from music into your writing. Keep the borders between your worlds open, because a network of trade routes is worthless if no cargo ever moves. The collector has many interests. The polymath has many interests that talk to each other. Principle 3. Go deep in seasons. Breadth doesn't mean doing everything at once. Spread across 5 pursuits in the same week and you'll drown. Every one of them will starve. The pattern in the research is not simultaneous chaos. It's rotation. The athletes sampled widely, then invested deeply, one commitment at a time. So give each interest a season, a stretch of months where it gets your primary focus while the others rest in the background. Depth is how a single field pays you. Rotation is how the combination pays you. You need both, just not on the same day. And when you live this way, something quietly changes. The trait doesn't disappear, it matures. The scattered version of you was a field of random seedlings, promising and fragile. The integrated version is that forest we talked about, layered, connected, able to survive the storms that flatten single-crop minds. You stop experiencing your interests as a swarm of distractions pulling you in 5 directions, and you start experiencing them as one system feeding itself. And the question that used to haunt you, "What do I do?" slowly loses its power, because you were never supposed to be a job title. You were supposed to be a combination. Maybe that's the larger truth hiding inside all of this. We were told our whole lives that greatness means narrowing, that a serious person picks one door and closes the rest. But when researchers actually opened the biographies of the most creative people who ever lived, they found the opposite. Minds that refused to close doors and won because of it, not in spite of it. The world will keep asking you to shrink into a label. You are allowed to decline. So, out of the 3 unfair advantages, importing ideas, immunity to entrenchment, or owning your intersection, which one do you recognize in yourself the most? Tell me in the comments. I read them, and I promise you're not the only one down there with 5 open tabs and a list instead of a job title. If this video reframed something for you, hit like and share it with that one friend who keeps apologizing for having too many interests, the one who needs to hear that they were never scattered, just early. And subscribe to Mindenix so we can keep decoding the hidden patterns of the mind together. Thank you for being here. Goodbye and see you next time.